This is the site of the Government Hill Wireless Station. It was the primary radio communications for the Alaska Railroad during its construction.
Do you remember what kind of personnel were in each of these buildings?
The mechanics were in there, all the pencil pushers were in there.
Before that 24 by 24 building was here, there was nothing.
So the context for the wireless building is in its long life, its early days were in the middle of the woods, and this neighborhood grew up around it. So it's not in its historical context.
So the trails were basically used by residents to get to the wireless station, to get to Government Hill. This was the only source of news, immediate news for the residents here in Anchorage, and they would, for 30 years, ride their bikes or drive early cars up to here to hear news of marriages and deaths and friends and family outside.
After the earthquake, nobody had communication, and we used to have to go through town to the schools. People could go there and write a message.
No kidding.
And we'd pick them up and bring them all back here.
These are some of the few surviving examples from before 1920 of structures built in Anchorage, and they're in a style that architects now call Italiente, but it was based on the architectural style of buildings that they were building in Panama City. Ships could see the light from the cupola and use it for navigation, and theoretically, someone could have crawled up there and looked out of it.
So, you think your office was on the front side, right or left of the store?
I think so.
Okay.
Currently, the Government Hill residents are in a planning process of selecting a number of projects for addressing with newly approved funds.
The latest Parks and Rec bond package was approved by the voters in the spring, and that allocated money to do a master plan for the Government Hill parks, and included in that would be the wireless building, the commons, the water tower, our green belt trails, and so forth here.
The idea of how many stories these buildings have been witness to over the years.
So this gives you a little schematic. So it's really just kind of
Very small.
8 boxy rooms.
The obvious next step is to retune the RFP.
They stand as a reminder for people passing by and for people who come from out of state after being gone for 50 years that these are still here and they can come and remember these stories.
And all through town at night, we left the windows open. You could hear those rifles jacking around.
I asked Corinne one year if she'd like one for her birthday, kind of find out where her roots came from and stuff, and she said, "No, I really don't like my DNA out there for everybody to have and whatnot." So I said, "Okay." Well, about a year later, I asked her again. I said, "You might just find out some of your family that you never knew you had."
He said he's wearing a powder blue shirt and beige slacks. But when his came back with all these relatives that we actually know, then I was kind of like, oh, then it interested me.
And so she said, well, I guess I'll try it, So we got her a kit, and lo and behold, it showed all kinds of neat stuff.
Hey, how are you?
How you doing? Oh,
Good to see you.
well, good to see you. Been 56 years, huh?
Yeah. Hey,
Hi.
no, 55.
55. Oh my
years.
God, I'm starting on a bad step.
Yeah.
I already made her a year older. Oh my God.
Oh, well, so great to see you.
Well,
I was not expecting to find my father. That was a long flight, huh? Man.
those delays. Son of a gun.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was pretty nervous. I'm still kind of nervous. I think it's probably obvious on it, but it was a good nervous.
Come on down and I'll show you to my classroom. And on the way, you get to meet my children.
In 1990, Posey Boggs left her nursing career and went back to school.
Well, it started because of my own children.
She started a small classroom in her own home for children with learning disabilities.
Our oldest, at the end of first grade, we were told to just leave the school district because no one could teach him to read.
Boggs says it wasn't just reading and phonics. Successfully reaching a child with severe dyslexia required a completely different approach.
I took the second training, which had a lot of phonemic awareness in it, which is validated by science as mandatory. This was my Bible back then. It was the assessment of learning disabilities.
But this transition wasn't easy or cheap.
You're starting at the bottom with no knowledge about how to teach reading. And so you have to have an intense course of study, and these courses are expensive.
And this path that she embarked on with her children was just the beginning.
Okay, so if you remember, those have to stay in one spot.
Boggs has been seeing Ella for 3 years now, and classes weren't always fun.
Because Ella was 6, we could see that the reading wasn't happening, the alphabet wasn't coming.
Show me fra.
But that didn't last long.
It teaches us how to read, and soon when I'm a grown-up, I'll learn how to read.
It's a relief to know that your child has the team and the resources and a person who really believes in her.
Say line.
Line.
Instead of I, say O.
With photojournalist Joshua Maxwell,
Own.
Maria Downey, Channel 2 News.
The ride itself is symbolic of what people go through when they're fighting cancer. They don't know what to expect each day.
It so perfectly embodies fighting cancer itself and life. It's random, it happens to anyone, it happens in ways you never thought could happen, and you just have to, every day, it's a privilege though, to like endure it, the pain, as well as the goodness. The person who I ride primarily for is my mom right here. When I was in high school a couple years back, she was diagnosed with stomach cancer.
I joined the organization for my dad, actually. He's a really big cyclist and also has leukemia, so it's been like a really cool experience getting to bike and get closer to him through biking, but also get to fight cancer for him too.
There's places that are uneven, but you know, if you were 100 years old, you'd be uneven too.
I happened to see this place pop up on Craigslist. I knew that it was among the oldest homes in Anchorage, and I had passed by Jim Dunlap's restored cottage down the street, and so that was my frame of reference.
On something this old, you have to just see what you got and then come up with a plan and try it, and if that doesn't work, then you try something a little different until you get it.
We found places where they had poured hot tar down into the cracks along the seams, just anything to stop it. And I guess at one point we found as many as 6 layers where it was just repair after repair piled on top of piles.
In the real estate ad, that's when I first understood that these were built by the Alaska Railroad initially in 1915 by the Alaska Engineering Commission. This is one that looks out over the point, and we believe that that this one is 239 West Harvard.
When you see a nail pattern that's kind of crooked on the old tar paper, you think about, you know, whoever drove those nails is probably long gone.
They housed railroad workers initially, and so in a way, at least for me, that comes full circle. And it's great to walk down to my office from here. It takes me 5 minutes.
Would have been milled in 1914 or 1915 and then put all in here when this place was built. And it's amazing to me, it probably has the original finish on it too.
A lot has happened since then, and it is a connection. That's really part of what it's all about too, is keeping that history alive and the connection.